I love comics. I love how they can show worlds that are so imaginative and beautifully drawn, a skill I wish I had. They can also create stories and scenarios that other mediums just can't quite do. Really, they're only bound by the limits of the imaginations of their creators. But of course, they do have problems, one of which is rationalizations. You know what I mean. How come that guy could fly in the air and has skin thicker than steel? Because unlike his native planet's red star, which he escaped on a rocket ship as a baby, Earth has a yellow star whose energy he can absorb. And that energy gives him the ability to fly? Yes. And shoot lasers from his eyes? Yes, that makes the most sense. It is heat energy, right? Okay, I'll grant you that, but also cold breath? Yellow sun. And speaking of Superman, didn't he die like a couple of decades ago? Actually, he wasn't quite dead when his body was snatched away and put into the Kryptonian healing matrix, which kept him alive though greatly underpowered. Well, didn't he also kill that monster who got him, Doomsday? It appeared so, but actually Doomsday can't die. You see, he's almost totally solid and has no internal organs. The cyborg Superman, Hank Henshaw, found his body and strapped it to an asteroid where he was supposed to float for all eternity. Alright. But then he was found by a deep space scavenger ship en route to Apocalypse, where even Dread Darkseid himself was overwhelmed. Yeah, okay. And so eventually Superman used a time-traveling device from Wave Rider, one of the Linear Men, to strand Doomsday at the end of time. Okay, I get it. But was then retrieved by a servant of Brainiac who intended to combine Brainiac's superior intellect with the superior physical power of Doomsday by engineering Alright, I get it! A clone. Now here's the thing about rationalizations. They're often convoluted and overthought, and they almost always overshoot a much simpler real-world explanation. Why is there a man who could fly and stop bullets and shoot lasers from his eyes? Because it's interesting. It's entertaining. It makes for a fun story. Why do comic book characters die and then come back? Die and then come back? Die and come back? Because it's a business. And if a character permanently dies, their story is over and you can no longer tell stories about them. You're basically throwing away interesting stories that people want to hear. Now in the world of comics, rationalizations can be fine. They're often needed to get the story off the ground in the first place. And as long as the writers don't pull too many out of their asses, you can sometimes find yourself in the middle of a unique story that only comics can tell well. What actually really bothers me is when rationalizations are expected to meet with the real world. Cue our friends, the feminists. Never at a loss to explain how society works, and how men keep fucking it up. Never at a loss to explain how men think, and how men should think, and how men should act, and what makes a real man. Always a rationalization to explain away any female imperfections. And you know, it really gets funny. Sometimes you just gotta sit back and let them run with it. It's like feminists are everyone's crazy old Uncle Bob who just won't stop with his stories. Did you know that we're living in a rape culture where rape is normalized and encouraged? Are you sure about that, Uncle Bob? That actually sounds totally untrue. It's true. Our society is misogynistic. Our society, half of which is women, hates women. Why, every time you see a rape joke somewhere, that just proves that we hate women, and it contributes to a culture of rape. Okay, Uncle Bob, that's wrong. No, it's not. We are living in a patriarchy, which benefits men and systematically oppresses women. But all we have to do is smash the patriarchy, and then everything will go back to normal. Wow, that's absurd, Uncle Bob. Now, speaking of rationalizations, if you saw my last video on Conan, you might know that I got into an epic war of words with my good friend Arthur B. from ferretbrain.com over the subject of Conan the Barbarian. It took me about 50 minutes of video and over 30 pages worth of back and forth messaging just to get him to admit that the villain of the story, who happened to be a beautiful female, was a villain. And all of that happiness stemmed from me rereading my old Conan comics and coming across this comment from a reader in Australia, who complained about the backstory of the newly introduced character Janessa. In Conan 12, we learn that Janessa, a female warrior whose strength is a match for the Cimmerian, actually paid a terrible price for it. She asks a witch for the strength equal to any man and gets trapped inside a cave where she is overwhelmed and raped by a demon. As each night passes, the number of demons increases, and she is raped mercilessly over and over until she finally learns to get stronger. The time she spends here is unclear, possibly years, until she's finally able to kill every demon for 1 month, and then she's released as the ultimate killing machine. Now bear in mind that even if it is years that pass, all of this happens over about 3 to 4 comic pages. And like the original Conan stories, the rapes aren't shown, only implied. But that wasn't really good enough for our Australian friend here, who wrote, and I quote, "Hey all, Conan forever and all that, amen." He sounds like a real devoted fan, right? Very glad to have a new take on the legend, but in issue 12, your writer needs a smack, of one kind or other. I am angry and disappointed with this issue, because you have offended my wife, and therefore me, and all women in general. This story lacks any sense of masculine maturity, and goes a long way in a short space to discrediting a beloved genre. Yes, Conan literature is full of lascivious depictions, but having a heroine gang-raped by demons every night for a decade is grotesque and weak. Actually, I agree, it is pretty weak. But I thought Janessa herself was pretty weak too, but that's another story. Conan is not meant to be porn, so why does a woman have to get raped as just a natural part of the past that brings the character into existence? How many male heroes ever get raped? The bad guys have had the opportunity every time Conan takes a crack on the head. I bet your readers couldn't handle that one at all. This is a bad habit in all forms of entertainment, where the female character is raped as a plot device to explain how a woman got to be something other than a mother or homemaker. It's a cliche that decent men shouldn't dream about, even in the context of fantasy. You can go as deep into it as you have the courage to ask questions of your society. From an academic and humanistic perspective, it belies our culture's inability to relate to women. Now all of this tells me a couple of things. First of all, if his stomach is that weak for brutality, then why is he reading Conan the fucking Barbarian? All this preachy bullshit about masculine maturity and decent men shouldn't even dream about rape just strikes me as so pandering and hypocritical. I mean, you are bothered when men get their limbs sliced off and their necks snapped and their heads severed, right? And the other thing I see is our well-reinforced and oft-repeated rationalization. You know, the one that takes rape as a plot device and says that its occurrence shows that society doesn't relate to women, or that the inclusion of rape as a plot device belies our misogyny and seeks to flip the script, as if it's that simple. How many male heroes get raped? They've had the chance every time Conan takes a crack on the head. Can you imagine the appeal of characters like Conan or Han Solo if they were just casually raped as a plot device? And you see this kind of bullshit thought process reflected in every Anita Sarkeesian out there who complains every time something bad happens to a woman in the world of fiction. Whenever a woman is killed or raped or punched in the stomach, you'll find this kind of person telling us that it means that society is nothing but patriarchy and misogyny, when really they've overshot it. It's much simpler than that. How many male heroes get raped? Yeah, what would that look like? What the? Ah! You've fallen right into my trap, He-Man. And now that I've got you, I'm going to fuck you in the ass. Ugh, you'll never get away with... Wait, what? You heard me, Prince Adam. Now where's that KY jelly? You... Well, are you gay? Nope. Well, are you sexually attracted to me? Nope. Then fucking why? Because this asshole thinks we need to balance the number of rapes between males and females in fiction. What are you talking about, you magical talking skeleton man from the mystical world of, Eternia? Yeah, shut up and grab those ankles. Here we go. Oh God. It's like literally just a bone. Yeah, why aren't more male protagonists raped? Yeah, okay, it's a nice theoretical argument, but there's a very simple reason that it doesn't happen often. It usually doesn't fit in or make any sense naturally, and it immediately takes you out of the reality the story is trying to create. It's just shoehorned in thanks to our fickle focus group appeasing mentality. Why does a woman have to get beaten up just to advance some lame storyline? I feel like someone really needs to just sit down with these people and teach them the fundamentals of drama. Bad things happen in fiction. It's called conflict. It's not what we want in real life, but it's often how drama is created in fiction. Focusing exclusively on how it only affects women is worse than useless. It's misleading. Tell me, what's the first fucking thing you do in Double Dragon after Marion gets punched in the stomach? You start going around punching men in the fucking stomach. Violence is a women's issue, and we need to show concern for how violence affects women. Because when women get the violence is perpetrated to the women, and that is violent. Now, if Violence wrote a book, and the name of the book was Women, it would be Violence on Women, and it would be Violent Women, Violence, Violentical Women. Shut the fuck up, Uncle Bob. Go ahead and flip the script and tell me how it works out. The game opens up and a group of men punches Billy and takes him away, and Marion immediately takes on the whole gang single-handedly to get him back. Do you see any problems with that? Do you buy that? Remember, it's not a comedy game or a parody game at all, if the story is meant to be taken just as seriously as the original. Do you immediately believe that story? Do you believe that a woman is going to take on a gang all by herself? Do you believe that she can? Or that she would? Does it take you out of the story at all? Well, like it or not, there is a kind of reality to the idea of a cowardly and unscrupulous man being able to overpower and kidnap a woman he covets. There is a kind of reality, albeit exaggerated, about one strong man being able to take on and beat down several men. And there's also a reality to a man instantly jumping into action to protect the person he cares about the most, his wife or girlfriend. Now let's get back to Janessa and our complaining Australian friend, because as it turned out, he wasn't alone. People kept writing letters and writing letters, some in support for the uncompromising trueness to the original, and others against it. And at the same time, they were also getting many similar letters of complaint about non-PC issues, like a nude cover and such. And so finally, in issue 39, they called the all-stop, they hit the emergency brake on the train, had all the cars come to a grinding halt, and devoted the entire letters column to addressing the issue of sexual assault. Telling us how sexual assault is bad, giving us some statistics and common myths about sexual assault, and even giving links to some professional resources for victims of sexual assault. Let me explain something about the bullshit idea that we as a society don't care about women, or that the bad things that happen to women in fiction reflect our misogyny. We're going to compare Janessa's origin story to another much more popular comic book character's origin story. Remember Doomsday, the beast who took out Superman? He was also born on Krypton, but hundreds of thousands of years before Superman, when Krypton was harsh and hostile, and only the fiercest creatures could survive it. Doomsday wasn't so much born as cloned by the evil scientist Bertrand. Bertrand and his team were trying to create the ultimate life form. And to do that, they took a cloned humanoid baby and they set it outside the safety of their dome for the express purpose of letting the environment and creatures tear it to pieces. And yes, I'm pausing on purpose, so we don't just casually blow through those details like they mean nothing. You want to talk about vile crimes? You want to have people upset over what they see happening on a fictional canvas? Yeah, let the fucking games begin, bitches. The scientists would then scoop up the remaining scraps, re-clone the baby, and try it again. The idea being that it got a little stronger each time, until eventually it grew strong enough to fight back against the creatures and the hellish environment and survive on its own. So let's do a side-by-side comparison of both Janessa and Doomsday. This also makes a couple of things very clear. One is that they're both actually pretty similar. They were both put under a long, enduring torture. Both were put through it with the idea of making them stronger, so that they would conceivably be a match for an iconic hero. Doomsday was meant to be a realistic physical threat to the Man of Steel, and Janessa was intended as a character who could actually throw down with the pride of Samaria. And to make it somewhat realistic, she needed to have a pretty damn extreme reason. Remember, Conan is always portrayed on screen by a physically overwhelming persona, because that's who he is in the stories, always depicted diving headfirst fearlessly into hordes of warriors and Cthulhuid monstrosities. If Janessa's backstory is that she works out in a gym, and she really, really pushes herself, do you buy that? Do you believe that this slender 130-some-odd pound woman is going to go toe-to-toe with this guy in a sword fight? Remember, she really, really exercised hard in the gym. You know the other thing this side-by-side comparison shows us beyond any shadow of a doubt? It's that Doomsday's origin story is worse than Janessa's in every possible way. Our crimes in question are the repeated rape of a woman and the repeated slaughtering of a baby. Want to tell me that rape is worse than murdering a newborn? Oh, I'm sorry, that's wrong. Thanks for playing, though. But she's a fully aware adult who knows what's happening. The baby doesn't know or feel anything. That's a good try, but as it turns out, when Doomsday grows strong enough to survive on his own, actually, he does carry the memories of all his previous deaths, which is why he attacks the dome and kills his creator. Doomsday's torture was longer. We're not really sure how long Janessa's torment lasted. She says years, decades, but it doesn't appear to be the case because she doesn't appear to age that much. This complainer said a decade, so let's call it that for now. We also don't know precisely how long Doomsday's torture lasted, but the minimum must be at least 32 years, because at one point it specifically refers to 30 years of work, and after that it says that he survived outside on his own for around 2 years. But it was probably even longer, judging from the fact that the scientists appear to be growing considerably older. Anyway, 32 sure beats the hell out of 10. There are more details in Doomsday's case. Honestly, in Janessa's case, we have no way of telling that she was raped at all, but for 2 sentences of text. We don't see her get naked, there are no pineapple-shaped cocks sticking out of her demon attackers. Actually, we could have just changed a sentence or two, and said instead that they killed her every night, and we wouldn't have had to change a single panel of art, and we would have avoided all this bullshit outrage. In Doomsday's case, we also don't see on screen what is happening to him, but unlike Janessa's case, we do see horrified reactions of people who are seeing what is happening, and we hear several explicit comments that let us know exactly what is going on off screen. Comments that include, "They're ripping him to shreds," and "The planet's searing atmosphere burned his lungs out." The baby's lungs. In every possible way, the origin story of Doomsday is far worse than Janessa's, and yet there was no outrage, no swarms of angry letters, no pulling the e-brake, calling an all-stop, and sitting us all down so we can all hold hands and learn together that, hey, rape is wrong. Don't do rape, because raping isn't good, and if it happens, call this number. I cannot stand this kind of patronizing bullshit. This kind of numbskull treatment of a serious issue. This myopic lack of understanding that if a person is so far gone that they will hold down and fuck someone against their will, then they've got a problem that a shirt pin or a bumper sticker or an obnoxious sign can't really fix. And if a person survived such an assault, I don't think that their period of soul-searching and attempt to rebalance their life is going to lead them to the letter to the editor section of a comic book. But there's no need to go into rationalizations. Dark Horse is a company in the comic book industry. I'm not mad at them, and it's not like I don't realize why they would do this. They were receiving many angry letters about some of their content, and when businesses displease their customers, customers don't buy their products. There's not even a direct link between the comic fans who don't mind Doomsday's origin and the comic fans who very much minded Janessa's origin. They happen a little over a decade apart. But I've got one message for those who say that society is misogynistic and doesn't care when bad things happen to women in fiction, doesn't care when they get raped. Fuck that and fuck you. Take a look at this graph charting the critical reception of the latest season of the TV series Game of Thrones. There's a pretty noticeable dip at the center of the chart for episode 6, isn't there? And if you look to the right, you notice another teeny tiny little dip at episode 9. Otherwise, it's pretty strong ratings all around. Game of Thrones is a great show. You got great writing, acting, set pieces, storyline. So what was it that got everyone in an uproar over? I'll give you a hint. It was a singular incident that colored the critics' attitude of the entire hour-long episode. You guessed it, it was a rape. The rape of a popular female character. Something that represented a change from the TV show and the book series. And our little teeny tiny spike of outrage in episode 9? Another single incident not manifested in the books. It was the burning to death of a little teenage girl at the hands of her parents. Yeah, we don't take rape seriously enough. We don't care about rape. From everything I've seen, it seems like in the outrage department, rape clearly and easily wins out, even over child murder. It seems that our knees are set to permanent jerk at the very mention of the word rape. And all evidence suggests to me that we only seem to give a shit when something bad happens to a woman. I'm sorry, but all this bullshit is way too big to hammer out in one sitting. So stay tuned for part 2, where we're going to explore further another aspect of feminism and comics. Shoehorning. Oh God. Oh God.